How many of you have ever felt hopeless? How many of you have ever felt lost? How many of you have felt like you could do more, you could be more, but you have no idea how to make it happen? Everyone went to a state school, and I thought, that would be amazing. Let me just stay here, what I know, with my friends. And my mom said, absolutely not, and then kicked me out of the nest. Now, ironically, every day since then, she's been trying to claw me back. And so I asked her one day, I said, Mom, this actually doesn't make any sense. Like, if you hadn't pushed me out, I never would have left in the first place. And she said, with no malice whatsoever, I just always thought you were going to fail and come home. That's where I started. Even I didn't think that I was going to go on to do big things. But growing up in a morbidly obese family in the 80s, there were two promises that I made myself. Promise number one day I would be rich, and one day I would have six-pack abs. I had no idea how I was going to accomplish either of those things, but I had set my sights on making that happen. I went to college. I was doing very well in film school. And I thought I was going to graduate and get a 3-picture deal. That was going to be my life. Go to USC Film School, supposedly the best film school in the country, show people what I can do, graduate, and all was going to be well. And then what I learned as I got through that my final thesis film, I finally realized that I was a terrible filmmaker. And that was a crushing blow. It was so crushing, in fact, that I've stolen 2 things in my life. I once stole a pair of bowling shoes, and then I stole the master to my final thesis film because I did not ever want anyone to see that film. I was so embarrassed. And there was one time where I was laying, this is back when payphones still existed, I was laying in the middle of campus on the ground holding that phone in my hand, talking to my mom, saying basically, this is hopeless, why did I ever do this? All of her dreams were about to come true, and I'm sure to her it sounded like I was about to move back home. But for me, I felt really hopeless and lost. How many of you have ever felt hopeless? How many of you have ever felt lost? How many of you have felt like you could do more, you could be more, but you have no idea how to make it happen? That's exactly how I felt. And then in 1999, a movie called The Matrix came out, and it changed my life. This movie, I'm not kidding, this movie gave me the framework with which to think about how life really is. And in the movie, Morpheus says, you have 2 options. You can take the red pill or the blue pill. Take the red pill. Now, the red pill's only promise is that you're going to wake up in the real world. You're going to understand the way the world really works. Because there's one thing I can tell you, and this is true of everyone in this room right now. The Matrix has you. Because the Matrix is your mind. The Matrix is the web of lies that we all unintentionally pull over our own eyes, that limit our beliefs, that limit the things that we think we can be. In that moment where I had failed in my thesis film, I thought that meant I was a failure. I didn't understand that there's a difference between failing, which is temporary, and being a failure, which is permanent. And the movie The Matrix made me question everything that I believe. Now, here's something from neuroscience. Think about this for a second. Your brain is encased in total darkness and silence. It never sees light. And yet, you recreate this world faithfully enough to be able to move around it without bumping into too much stuff. But the reality is there's actually a dime-size area where you have no sight, dead center in each eye, where the optic nerve connects to the eye, but you don't see it. Why? Because the brain is filling it in. The brain is making its best guess as to what's there. And once I realized that's how the Matrix works, for good intention or ill, it doesn't matter, but something is constructing the world around you. And once you understand that that world is a construction, it is made up of your mind. Right now, in this moment, you are choosing to believe a whole host of things. But those beliefs are a choice. And understanding that those beliefs are a choice will set you free. The biggest piece of advice that I have for you guys today, and if you remember nothing else that I say, remember this. Do and believe that which moves you towards your goals. Period. Of everything you choose to believe about yourself. And right now, the things you believe about yourself are so crazy that your worst enemies probably don't think about you the things that you think about yourself. And so you have to understand that this is all a construct. This is the matrix. Your mind is doing its best to get you around this world, but one of the things that your brain is meant to do is keep you safe. But it's meant to keep you safe from a time long ago where there was a lion likely to jump out at you. And when you're living in that kind of scenario, being in fear, being less than you could be, being afraid of being ostracized, which meant that you were going to get put out and it was almost certain death. But it's not that way anymore. And we have a chance to construct a life that we want. I got to understand that I could learn Kung Fu. Now, it's fun to ask whether we're really living in the matrix or not. And I really don't care about the answer to that question. What I want to know is, what is my Kung Fu? And what does it mean to jack into the matrix? And what I began to realize was that jacking into the matrix for me was reading, and my Kung Fu was business. And in reading, I could assimilate a lot of information very, very quickly, and I realized one fundamental truth of the human condition. The brain is plastic. You can learn anything at any time. Now, here's something that I choose to believe that changed my whole life, and I really hope that you guys choose to believe this because it will be the most empowering thing that you can do. I believe I can do anything I set my mind to without limitation. Now, if you believe, really think about this for a second. If you believe you can do anything you set your mind to without limitation, how you spend your time becomes a spiritual consideration. Because you could do anything. You could cure disease, you could end famine, wars, change people on a global scale. But the most important thing to think about when you think about change, everyone thinks of changing the world, no one thinks of changing themselves. Very famous quote. And you can change yourself. The brain is plastic. You can learn well into adulthood. I'm sure that you guys have heard the 10,000 hour principle, how you gain mastery and get good at something. And once you identify what your Kung Fu is, what that thing is that you want to get truly great at, then it's about applying yourself. It's about execution. It's about actually doing the things to get there. But here's the critical part. Man cannot remake himself without suffering, for he is both the marble and the sculptor. Every time I hear that quote, it gives me chills. Because here's the fundamental question everybody has to ask themselves. Don't worry about who you are today, right? I didn't worry about who I was when I was failing in film school. That didn't matter. What mattered was, who was I willing to become and what was the price that I was willing to pay to get there? And that is what my mom didn't understand. What she couldn't see when I was a kid, that nobody could see when I was a kid, that in me was ambition. I knew one day I would be rich and one day I would have six-pack abs. And so if I was going to make the change in my life, I had to begin to look at things as they were. I had to take the red pill. I had to live in the world not as I wanted to be, but as it actually is.